This is from a theater person in the 50s, Peter Brooks. An empty space. Courtroom is an empty space. What Peter Brooks was talking about is that theater had become too much about the trappings, the sets, the costumes. Not anymore about interaction, conflict, this story, right? But for our purposes, and this is, how many people here are public defenders? Keep your hand up. Keep your hand up if you're a public defender, and you have a huge budget for demonstrative evidence. Keep your hand up. What? What? This is the cheapest demonstrative evidence you're ever going to hear of. We're going to use this empty space, and you can do this whether you can move around the courtroom or not. It's much easier if you can move, but you can do it even if you can't. If I don't tell you how, remind me. I can make this space in the Weller courtroom anything I want. It could be any scene that I want in the context of my case, right? It can be a car on a drunk driving case where the officer's outside the car and you're going to create the car because you're trying to create a relationship or power imbalance, right? Or fear, whatever the case may be. It can be a bedroom in a sexual assault case, in the right sexual assault case, right? It can be the car ride with the mom and the little girl on the way to go see the social worker, right? Which was how I used it in a child sexual assault case. Created that car ride because that car ride was crucial to what was said after that and why it was so inconsistent with anything that had come out before that. It could be a bedroom where somebody allegedly climbed in through a window to have non-consensual sex with somebody, and you're going to create how unreasonable that would be given the makeup of the bedroom. You can create this space, and once you do, as long as you're consistent with it, the jury will see it. They'll see it. How many people have ever seen live improv? You should see more. You should see some live improv because it's amazing what they do with an empty space, right? In live improv, unlike SNL, usually it's just a blank stage, maybe a chair, maybe a hat rack. I mean, there's just not a lot, but they're creating space. And watch, what happens is every single actor that's up there has a contract with each other that if I create a space, we're in a bus. Then everybody else who's in that scene is in a bus. Nobody's going to violate that rule. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to create a space that's consistent with not guilty or innocence in our case. We're going to be consistent with it. We're going to respect it. We're going to refer to it throughout the trial, and we're going to revisit it during the closing argument. Let me give you a concrete example. The Old Style Inn. Anybody ever been to the Old Style Inn in La Crosse, Wisconsin? And I had a case at the Old Style Inn. Here's a couple of pictures from the case. The one on the top there is the front of the building. I don't know if you can tell, but there's two doors. There's the door that's closest to you, blue, and a little bit further down, there's a little bit blue there. That's the second door, right? This is in the inside. Straight back is where the bar is. Got a patron here, obviously. And then, they have some gambling machines, that sort of thing there, for fun only. For fun only. So my case is, my guy's the bartender. He's got a sawed-off bat behind the bar filled with lead. A guy comes in screaming about the Afghanistan war, acting sort of unruly, a little bit scary. My guy whacks him on the head, busts his head open, causes permanent brain damage. The allegation was reckless endangerment, first-degree reckless endangerment, that there wasn't defense of others, defense of self, that sort of thing. Our defense it was defense of others more than self. What I did in the opening is I set up the courtroom, the courtroom, as if the jury is right where those chairs are, sitting up against the bench. You see what I'm talking about? Right? And my guy's then right behind them. So if you're the jury, I'm going to talk about the fact that Mr. Johnson was standing here, and the patrons at the bar were about where you all are. Now, behind you on that side would be one door, and over on that side is the other door. And we got the gambling machines over here, right? And so then I set this whole thing up, and every time I talk about the guy coming in and what he's saying, I'm doing it right here, and I'm like, can you see him coming in? This is the opening, right? This is all the opening. Can you see him coming in? Kinesthetic people, right? Can you see him coming in? He's yelling. The bartender's scared for himself, but not as much. He's scared for these other people because the people are turning around to look. They're turning around, they're looking. Now, when you're from the front row, you're having this urge to run and look, because that's just the nature, right? They're turning around and looking. And we set up this whole thing. Do the cross-examination of the guy who got his head whacked open. Do the same thing. I want you to imagine that we're in the bar right now. You're on the witness stand. I want you to imagine we're in the bar, and that the bar is right here, and that the doors are there and there. Are you with me? And we do the whole cross where he's now in my space, right? Same thing on the direct with my client. Mr. Johnson, you heard me talk about this earlier. I set up the bar there with the doors in the back. Is that accurate? All right, well, tell us some more. Give us some more description about it. Right, and he sets up the whole thing, and then I'm standing down here as if I'm him for the entire direct, while he's up there telling me what's happening, and I'm watching it happen as he's explaining what I'm seeing. Right? Does that make sense? And you get up in the closing, and you remember when he came in? You remember how scared people were? They're all in that same place. That's the story. That's the power of the story.
The jurors that you're dealing with, I don't want to sound like I'm some elitist guy or something like that, but the bottom line is you don't know who's going to be on that jury. Some of them, English might not be the first language. They might not want to be there. They might not understand what you're saying. Some have a 5th grade education. Yeah. Some hate you as a defense lawyer because you're a bad person. Just inherently, they don't like you. There's all these biases and all these backgrounds we're dealing with a civilian jury. So I remember years ago, I listened to a NACDL class where they were talking about explaining things to the jury like they're a 5th grade level. And I think that's kind of how you have to do it. And it's not talking down to them. Most novels are written at a 5th or 6th grade level, including Stephen King, because that's the level that we can understand things at, and that's a very basic level without getting into too much detail, where they don't even know what you're talking about. The moment you start getting into the details like YSTR DNA and all these alleles and all that, they're doodling and writing down their shopping list, in my opinion.
Okay, so here's an example when we get. And you know, after you ask this question, the person that you're asking the question of can come back and try to be unresponsive. But if you keep it to the point, one fact per question, you know, at some point there's no way that they can't agree with what you're asking them. So, for example, question: when a person talks, they can release saliva from their mouth. You're expecting a yes or no answer from that person. Talking can transfer skin cells. Talking can transfer DNA. The more a person talks, the more likely they will transfer saliva and DNA to individuals and items near them. If 2 people talk at a close distance, they can transfer saliva and DNA to each other. You see, what we've done in this is we've taken the information that we've taken from the books and we've put them into just broken down questions. So when you're questioning the experts or whoever you've got on the witness stand, you know, when it comes to this kind of thing, they really have to agree because it's coming directly from the books that they have used for their training or they're supposed to have used for their training. Want to keep going down some of the other ones?
We have about 7 examples, but you're going to get these slides. This came actually from a case we did, U.S. v. Moore, and that's a case of rape, and they tried to pin a sexual assault and rape on my client. There's some mistaken cross-racial identification there, but they said, no, we got the right guy because we found some skin cells.
5.
Yes.
5 cells.
And it was on her neck, but it turns out the 2 of them were in the car drinking out of a bottle on the back of the car, sharing the bottle. They were talking for about an hour, and that's what they were using to pin him to this crime, because she couldn't identify the person. She was throwing out some different allegations. And so it was good because we were able I put my glasses in my mouth like that, and I was asking the expert, the DNA expert, about the number of cells that come out of the mouth, and now the tip of my glasses probably have some cells, more than 5. And you got to be careful though, because they can detect DNA and try to pin it on your client at such a low level. It's so sensitive now. And that's a lot of what we talk about in the newest DNA book, is the sensitivity can't even put a person at the scene because it could be tertiary or secondary transfer.
This is a really important principle too. The principle of closure. One of the things that the storytelling model doesn't do for us in psychology, but does do for us in life, it often allows us to have an end. And people like an end. And the reason they adopt a story is because it has a beginning, middle, and end, and they are the end. When they submit a verdict, it's over. But you don't have to give them closure of just guilty or not guilty. Now consider this. You don't have to just give them closure for guilt or not guilt. You can give them closure for other things. Algorithms. Algorithms are yes, no, if then, go here. And that allows them to complete a task. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see this witness. You're going to get a chance to evaluate her. You're going to look at her motives. If her motives are negative, then you're going to know that you have reasons to doubt her testimony. If you have reasons to doubt her testimony, closure. Case closed. You've given them a way to end the story. Using lists is ultimately meant to give them a way to end their story. People don't like unanswered questions or ambiguity. They want to resolve it, and jurors really want to resolve things. So, since it's a goal-driven activity, we're going to give them ways by selecting the most relevant information that one should look at and have a chance to come our way. We're going to initiate these sustaining cognitive manipulations that are required to achieve our particular outcome. Makes me sound smart, but what it means is we're going to give them an answer, a question that they can answer. Not a hard one that we figured out. And they're going to take a look at it and get closure by step-by-step evaluations. Step by step. Can you imagine if you were a prosecutor and somebody got up with not 50 lists, but 7 really good lists and said, ladies and gentlemen, they've got to prove these 47 points and they've only proved 18. I would feel uncomfortable, right? And then if they don't prove these points, ladies and gentlemen, it's not guilty. It's easy. I don't care what their story and their narrative is. They didn't prove these points. It's out. You don't get to use them. Algorithms. And by the way, another 1%, we all know this, it's a different topic, but don't be afraid to play for the hung jury. Okay? From time to time, you got nothing else. Just tell them from the beginning, we can't decide this. We're never going to decide it. We all disagree. That's why we're sitting here. We disagree with them, they disagree with us, and we think you guys are going to disagree with each other because this is a case that's just ripe for disagreement. Just hang it from the beginning and let them have it. All right. Algorithms, as I mentioned, give a place for closure. But be careful with your algorithms that you don't go the wrong way. Stop war, peace now. Stop peace, war now. You got to line your algorithms to flow correctly. Okay? You got to think it through. If you find this, then this. If you find that, then this. That's not guilty. They don't have DNA. It wasn't on her. They studied it. They looked at it. Yes, 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 yes. If they don't have it, then how could he have done that? Well, lots of ways, because that's another variable, but that comes to right here. And this is a real troubling thing. We might have fallen into this, and it'd be interesting to see if anybody was willing to raise their hand on this. There's a ton of study on confessions that says the following. If somebody confesses, even if you have overwhelming evidence that shows the confession was not valid, even including DNA evidence that is favorable to us, that contradicts, and if the person recants their testimony 5 minutes later, the conviction rates are still above 90%. And there's a lot of studies that are done on this. And you want to know why? They're willing to ignore it all for 2 reasons. One, because people believe that statements against self-interests are the truth. End of subject. Regardless of anything else. This is a psychological, almost near fact. People believe that statements against self-interest are the truth.